The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as 17-year-old Dawit Tesfaye carefully measured sodium bicarbonate into his beaker. His dark eyes focused intently on the precise measurements. The chemistry lab was eerily quiet at 6:30 in the evening. Most students having fled Lincoln High School hours ago. Only the gentle hum of the ventilation system and the distant sound of janitors' carts echoed through the empty hallways. Dawit had grown accustomed to these solitary hours, finding peace in the methodical process of scientific experimentation that reminded him of his father's laboratory back in Addis Ababa. His notebook, filled with meticulous handwriting in both English and Amharic, lay open beside him. The volcano model for the regional science fair was nearly complete, its papier-mâché exterior carefully painted to resemble Mount Vesuvius. 3 months of research, countless hours of preparation, and dreams of impressing the judges who might notice his work and perhaps offer him the scholarship he desperately needed to attend MIT. The exchange program had been his golden ticket to America, but staying here required excellence that went beyond mere participation. Still here. Dawit. Mrs. Patterson's voice cut through his concentration as the chemistry teacher peered through the doorway, her graying hair escaping from its afternoon bun. Yes, ma'am. Just finishing the final tests for my volcano project. I want to make sure the chemical reaction produces the perfect eruption sequence. You know you don't have to prove yourself so hard, son. Your work speaks for itself. Her kind eyes crinkled with concern. But don't stay too much longer. Security does their rounds at 8. Dawit nodded, grateful for her encouragement. Mrs. Patterson had been one of the few teachers who truly saw his potential, rather than viewing him through the lens of low expectations that seemed to follow foreign students. She understood his drive, perhaps because she recognized the weight of representing not just himself, but his entire country in the minds of his American peers. As her footsteps faded down the corridor, Dawit returned to his work. The mixture began to bubble and foam, creating the perfect volcanic eruption he had calculated. He smiled, thinking of his younger sister Hanan back home, who would be fascinated by the spectacle. In 6 months, when his exchange year ended, he would return with knowledge and experiences that could help build Ethiopia's next generation of scientists. The satisfaction of success was interrupted by the sharp buzz of his phone, a text from his host family reminding him about dinner at 7:30. Dawit glanced at the clock and began packing his materials, carefully sealing the remaining chemicals in their proper containers. His methodical approach to cleanup was something his chemistry teacher particularly appreciated, noting how many American students simply abandoned their stations in disarray. Outside in the faculty parking lot, Karen Whitmore sat in her silver BMW, engine running, eyes fixed on the chemistry lab windows. Her manicured fingers drummed against the steering wheel with increasing agitation. For 45 minutes, she had watched the Ethiopian boy moving around the lab, handling bottles and equipment, staying behind when all the other students had left. Her imagination, poisoned by months of resentment and mounting frustration, began weaving a narrative far removed from the innocent reality of scientific curiosity. "What is he really doing in there?" she muttered to herself, reaching for her phone. Karen's son Michael had been caught cheating on his chemistry final 3 weeks ago, an incident that cost him his early admission to Duke University and shattered her carefully constructed image as the perfect suburban mother. The humiliation at the school board meeting, where she had demanded Michael's reinstatement, while Dawit's academic achievements were held up as an example of student excellence, still burned in her chest like acid. The comparison had been devastating. Here was a foreign student, working with limited resources and cultural barriers, outperforming her son who had every advantage money could buy: private tutors, expensive equipment, connections through her husband's law firm, all rendered meaningless by raw talent and dedication she couldn't purchase. The injustice of it consumed her thoughts, feeding a growing obsession with finding fault in Dawood's success. Through the lab window, she watched him handle bottles of chemicals, his movements deliberate and focused. In her distorted perception, his scientific curiosity transformed into something sinister. The late hours, the solitary work, the foreign writing in his notebook that she couldn't understand, all became evidence in a conspiracy theory that justified her growing hatred. "No normal student works alone this late," she whispered, her voice gaining conviction with each word. "Not unless they're planning something." Karen's fingers moved across her phone screen with sudden purpose. 911 appeared in the dialer, the numbers glowing ominously in the dim interior of her car. 3 digits that would shatter multiple lives, destroy a community's sense of security, and expose the depths of prejudice masquerading as concern for public safety. 911. What's your emergency? The operator's calm professionalism contrasted sharply with Karen's suddenly breathless delivery. "I'm at Lincoln High School, and there's a foreign student in the chemistry lab. He's been working alone for hours with chemicals and equipment. I think he might be planning some kind of attack." "Ma'am, can you describe what you're observing specifically?" "He's mixing chemicals, writing in some foreign language, staying after hours when no one else is around. He's from Ethiopia or somewhere like that. This isn't normal behavior for a high school student." Karen's voice rose with manufactured urgency, each word adding weight to her fabricated emergency. "Are you currently safe? Do you see any immediate threat?" "I don't know. He could have explosives, weapons, anything. Schools have been attacked before, and this fits the pattern. You need to send someone immediately before it's too late." The lie crystallized in that moment, transforming from vague suspicion into apparent certainty. Karen hung up the phone and sat back in her seat, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had done her civic duty, she told herself. If she was wrong, no harm would come to an innocent student. If she was right, she would be a hero who prevented a tragedy. Inside the chemistry lab, Dawood carefully placed his volcano model in the storage cabinet, unaware that his world was about to implode. He hummed softly, a traditional Ethiopian song his grandmother used to sing while she prepared coffee ceremonies. The melody carried memories of home, of family gatherings where his academic achievements were celebrated with genuine pride and hope for the future. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was his friend Marcus asking about their planned study session for the calculus exam. Dawood typed a quick response, confirming he would be ready to review derivatives after dinner. The normalcy of teenage concerns, academic pressures, and friendship felt comforting in the empty school building. The first sign of trouble came as a distant rumble of engines, growing louder by the second. Dawood looked up from his phone, confusion creasing his brow as the sound multiplied and approached with alarming speed. Through the lab windows, red and blue lights began strobing across the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced between the chemical storage cabinets. "Attention students and faculty. This is a code red lockdown. All personnel must remain in current locations and await further instructions." The announcement crackled through the school's intercom system with mechanical urgency that sent ice through Dawood's veins. His first instinct was to look for Mrs. Patterson, but the hallways had fallen silent, except for the increasing crescendo of sirens outside. Dawood moved to the window, pressing his face against the glass to see the parking lot filling with police vehicles, SWAT trucks, and emergency responders in tactical gear. The scene looked like something from a movie, surreal and terrifying in its sudden intensity. "What's happening?" he whispered to himself, his English momentarily failing as fear triggered a reversion to Amharic. Egzabher Yawaral. Ena Hager Yelim. The answer came in the form of heavy boots echoing through the corridors, growing closer with each thunderous step. Dawit's hands began to shake as he realized the enormity of whatever situation had unfolded. He thought of his parents, of the shame it would bring to his family if he were somehow involved in trouble at school. The exchange program had been their sacrifice, their investment in his future, and the thought of disappointing them felt worse than whatever immediate danger he might face. Police hands where we can see them. The chemistry lab door exploded inward as tactical officers streamed through the entrance. Assault rifles trained on Dawit's frozen form. The fluorescent lights reflected off their helmets and body armor, creating a disorienting kaleidoscope of authority and aggression that overwhelmed his senses. Time seemed to slow as he registered the red laser dots dancing across his chest, the shouted commands overlapping into incomprehensible noise. "Get on the ground now, hands behind your head." Dawit's body moved without conscious thought. Muscle memory from childhood games suddenly insufficient for this adult reality of life and death commands. His knees hit the linoleum floor with painful force, hands clasping behind his neck as he had seen in American television shows. The cold floor pressed against his cheek as officers swarmed around him, their boots forming a circle of judgment and suspicion. "What is your name?" The lead officer's voice cut through the chaos with professional detachment. "Dawit Tesfaye. I'm a student here. I was just working on my science project." His accent seemed thicker now, each word carefully pronounced through trembling lips. "Please. I don't understand what's happening." "We received a report that you were planning some kind of attack. What are all these chemicals for?" The question hit him like a physical blow, robbing him of breath and rational thought. Attack. The word echoed in his mind, so foreign and impossible that it took several seconds to process its meaning. His volcano project, his dreams of scientific excellence, his months of careful preparation, all suddenly viewed through a lens of suspicion and fear. "My science fair project. It's a volcano. I can show you my notebook, my research." Dawit's voice cracked with desperation as he tried to make them understand. "I've been working on it for 3 months. Mrs. Patterson knows. She's my teacher. She can explain." The officers began examining his workspace with methodical precision, photographing every bottle, every piece of equipment, every page of his bilingual notes. What had been a sanctuary of learning and discovery transformed into a crime scene under their scrutiny. The volcano model, his pride and joy, was handled like potential evidence of wrongdoing. Outside the school, news vans began arriving as word of the incident spread through social media and police scanners. Parents received automated calls informing them of the lockdown, sending waves of panic through the community as they imagined the worst-case scenarios that had become all too common in American schools. Within an hour, Lincoln High School was surrounded by a circus of media attention, anxious families, and law enforcement agencies coordinating their response to what they believed was a prevented tragedy. Karen Whitmore remained in her BMW, watching the unfolding drama with a mixture of vindication and growing unease. The magnitude of the response exceeded even her expectations, transforming her spiteful phone call into a community crisis that would dominate local news for weeks. But as she watched Dawit being led away in handcuffs, a small voice in the back of her mind began questioning whether her assumptions had been correct. She silenced that voice with reminders of Michael's ruined future, of the humiliation she had endured, of the need for someone to pay for the injustices that had befallen her perfect family. If the Ethiopian boy was innocent, the investigation would clear him. If he was guilty, she had potentially saved lives. Either way, her actions were justified by the possibility of preventing tragedy. Inside the school, Mrs. Patterson had been located and was now frantically explaining Dawit's project to the investigators. Her voice shook with indignation as she described his dedication, his academic excellence, and the complete impossibility that he could have been planning violence. But her protests were lost in the machinery of emergency response, protocols that prioritized caution over individual rights when potential terrorism was suspected. "He's been working on this volcano for months," she insisted, holding up his research notebook. "Every calculation, every experiment, it's all documented. This is science, not terrorism." The detective in charge nodded politely, while continuing to catalog evidence. "Ma'am, we appreciate your input, but we have to investigate every credible threat thoroughly. The safety of the community has to come first." Credible threat. He's 17 years old, working on a school project. Who reported this nonsense? That question hung in the air as the investigation continued into the night. Dawit was transported to the police station for questioning, his host family notified, and rushing across town with a combination of terror and confusion. His real parents, 8,000 miles away in Addis Ababa, would wake up to news that their son was suspected of planning a school shooting, an accusation so foreign to everything they knew about him that they would initially assume there had been some terrible mistake. The holding cell at the county detention facility was not designed for teenage honor students. Dawit sat on the thin mattress, still wearing his Lincoln High School Chemistry Club t-shirt, staring at walls covered with graffiti and despair. The fluorescent lighting was harsh and constant, denying him even the comfort of darkness to process what had happened to his life in the span of a few hours. His phone had been confiscated, along with everything else, cutting him off from contact with anyone who might provide comfort or explanation. The silence was broken only by distant conversations between guards and the occasional clang of metal doors. He thought about his sister Hanan, probably doing homework at the kitchen table their father had built by hand. She would be proud of his volcano project, would want to see pictures of the eruption sequence he had perfected. Now that project was evidence in a case that portrayed him as a potential terrorist. The irony was not lost on him that his love of chemistry, the same subject that had earned him recognition and scholarship opportunities, had become the foundation for accusations that could destroy his future. Every late night in the lab, every careful measurement and precise calculation, reinterpreted as suspicious behavior by people who had never bothered to know who he really was. The interrogation began at midnight, conducted by Detective Martinez, a veteran investigator with tired eyes and the manner of someone who had seen too much human cruelty to trust easily. He sat across from Dawit in a windowless room, a digital recorder between them, capturing every word of a conversation that would determine the trajectory of a young man's life. "Dawit, I'm going to ask you some questions about your activities at the school today. I want you to be completely honest with me." "Okay." "Yes, sir. I have nothing to hide." Dawit's voice was hoarse from stress and the dry air of the detention facility. "I was working on my volcano project for the regional science fair. I can explain everything I was doing." "Tell me about the chemicals you were using." For the next 3 hours, Dawit explained his project in excruciating detail. Every compound, every measurement, every step of the process that created the volcanic eruption effect. His passion for the subject overcame his fear, and despite the circumstances, his eyes lit up as he described the chemical reactions that powered his model volcano. Detective Martinez found himself drawn into the explanation. recognizing genuine enthusiasm and scientific curiosity rather than the cold calculation of someone planning violence. You said you've been working on this for 3 months. Can you prove that? My notebook has all the dates and calculations. Mrs. Patterson can confirm everything. I also have emails with my project advisor at the university. Professor Johnson from the chemistry department has been helping me refine my approach. Dawit leaned forward earnestly, desperate to make the detective understand. I have documentation for everything. This is my dream, not a weapon. While Dawit was being questioned, teams of investigators were verifying every aspect of his story. His notebook was examined by chemistry experts who confirmed that his calculations were consistent with a volcano science project rather than bomb-making. His emails were analyzed, his host family interviewed, his teachers contacted, despite the late hour. Each piece of evidence supported his innocence, building a case for mistaken identity and false accusations rather than prevented terrorism. Mrs. Patterson had called the principal at home, demanding answers about why her student was being treated as a criminal. Principal Rodriguez, already fielding calls from concerned parents and media outlets, was beginning to realize that the school had become the center of a community crisis, based on what appeared to be a tragic misunderstanding. "We need to get to the bottom of this quickly," he told the lead detective. "If this young man is innocent, every hour he spends in custody is a violation of everything our school stands for. And if someone made a false report, they need to be held accountable for the chaos they've created." Dawn was breaking over Lincoln High School when the first cracks appeared in the case against Dawit. Professor Johnson from the State University arrived with documentation proving that Dawit had been corresponding with him about the volcano project for 2 months. The emails detailed scientific discussions about chemical ratios, eruption sequences, and presentation strategies that clearly indicated academic rather than violent intent. "This young man is one of the most promising students I've worked with in 15 years of teaching," Professor Johnson told the assembled investigators. "His approach to chemistry is methodical, ethical, and purely focused on education. The idea that he would use his knowledge for violence is absurd to anyone who knows him." The breakthrough came when Detective Martinez's partner found security footage from the school's cameras. The recordings showed Dawit's activities in the chemistry lab over several weeks, revealing a pattern of diligent work on the same project, consultation with teachers, and behavior consistent with an enthusiastic student rather than someone planning an attack. The footage also revealed something else that changed the entire complexion of the case. Karen Whitmore's silver BMW was visible in the parking lot footage, arriving shortly after Dawit entered the chemistry lab and remaining there until the police arrived. The timestamp showed that she had been watching him for nearly an hour before making the 911 call, suggesting premeditation rather than spontaneous concern for public safety. "We need to talk to this woman," Detective Martinez said, pointing to Karen's car on the monitor. "Her behavior pattern suggests this might not be the emergency response she claimed it was." Meanwhile, the community was waking up to news reports about the overnight lockdown at Lincoln High School. Parents, who had rushed to the school in panic, were now learning that their children were safe, that the suspected attack had been a false alarm, and that a promising young exchange student was being held on charges that seemed increasingly questionable. Social media erupted with debates about racial profiling, immigration, and the dangers of false accusations in an era of heightened security concerns. Dawit's classmates began sharing stories about his character, his academic achievements, and his kindness to other students. The hashtag #JusticeForDawit began trending as the community realized that an innocent young man was suffering for someone else's prejudice and fear. At 8 in the morning, Detective Martinez knocked on Karen Whitmore's front door. She answered in a silk robe, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, betraying the fact that she had been awake all night following the news coverage of the incident she had triggered. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Detective Martinez with the County Sheriff's Office. I need to ask you some questions about the 911 call you made yesterday evening." Karen's composure faltered for just a moment, her eyes darting past the detective to see if neighbors were watching. "Of course, officer. I was just doing my civic duty. Is the school safe now?" "The school was never in danger. Ma'am, the student you reported was working on a science project. I need to understand what specifically made you believe he was planning an attack." The question forced Karen to articulate suspicions that sounded increasingly absurd when spoken aloud. Her stammered explanation about late hours and chemical handling revealed the flimsiness of her evidence, while her repeated references to Dawood's foreign origin exposed the racial bias underlying her assumptions. He was acting suspicious, working alone, writing in that foreign language. You can't be too careful these days, especially with international students. Who knows what they're really thinking? Detective Martinez's expression hardened as he recognized the prejudice driving her accusations. "Mrs. Whitmore, making a false report to emergency services is a serious crime. Your call triggered a SWAT response, traumatized an innocent student, and caused a community-wide panic. I'm going to need you to come to the station for a formal interview." The color drained from Karen's face as she realized the potential consequences of her actions. Her husband, a prominent attorney, would be furious about the legal exposure she had created for their family. Her social standing in the community would be destroyed when people learned that she was responsible for the false emergency that had terrorized the entire town. "I was trying to protect people," she protested weakly. "How was I supposed to know he was innocent?" "By not assuming guilt based on someone's race and nationality," Detective Martinez replied coldly. "By understanding that students working on science projects is normal behavior, not suspicious activity. By recognizing that your personal grievances don't justify traumatizing innocent people." As Karen was driven to the police station for questioning, news of her arrest began spreading through the community. Parents who had supported her son Michael's academic career began distancing themselves from the family, horrified by the revelation that she had falsely accused an honor student of terrorism. The private school applications they had submitted after Michael's expulsion from Lincoln High were quietly withdrawn as administrators learned about the family's role in the crisis. Back at the detention facility, Dawood was finally released after 12 hours of custody that felt like an eternity. His host parents, the Johnsons, embraced him with tears of relief and anger at the injustice he had suffered. Mrs. Patterson was waiting with his volcano project, now cleared of suspicion and recognized once again as the work of scientific excellence it had always been. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice thick with emotion. "You deserve so much better than this community gave you yesterday." Dawood looked at his volcano model, its painted slopes still perfect, despite being handled as evidence. The project that had brought him such joy now carried the weight of trauma and injustice, but also the vindication of truth over prejudice. "It's okay, Mrs. Patterson. Science doesn't lie. People do. But science always tells the truth." The aftermath of the false accusation reverberated through Lincoln High School for weeks. Dawood returned to classes to find an outpouring of support from classmates who were ashamed of how their community had treated him. Teachers went out of their way to acknowledge his academic excellence and personal character, trying to repair the damage done by one person's malicious assumptions. Karen Whitmore was charged with filing a false police report, a felony that carried potential jail time and hefty fines. The district attorney, recognizing the community impact of her actions, decided to prosecute the case aggressively as a deterrent against similar false accusations. Her husband's law firm quietly asked him to take a leave of absence, as the scandal became impossible to ignore. The investigation revealed the full extent of Karen's motivations, including her son's academic failures and her resentment toward Dawood's success. School board meetings became forums for community discussion about racial bias, the treatment of international students, and the responsibility that comes with emergency reporting. Parents who had initially supported Karen's vigilance now questioned their own assumptions about foreign students and what constituted suspicious behavior. 2 months after the incident, Dawood's volcano project won first place at the regional science fair, earning him a scholarship to MIT that would cover his full undergraduate education. The presentation was attended by media outlets, school officials, and community members who wanted to celebrate his resilience and academic achievement after the trauma he had endured. Professor Johnson served as one of the judges, watching with pride as Dawood explained his chemical calculations to a fascinated audience. This young man represents the best of scientific curiosity and determination, the professor announced during the award ceremony. His work would be impressive under any circumstances, but his perseverance after facing false accusations makes it truly extraordinary. During his acceptance speech, Dawood spoke with quiet dignity about the power of education to overcome prejudice and the importance of supporting international students who come to America seeking knowledge and opportunity. His words carried the weight of experience, maturity forced upon him by circumstances no teenager should face. "Science belongs to everyone," he said, holding his first-place trophy. "Chemistry doesn't care about your nationality or the color of your skin. It only cares about precision, dedication, and the pursuit of truth. That's what I learned from this experience, and that's what I want to share with other young scientists who might face similar challenges." Karen Whitmore was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 5 years of probation, and ordered to pay restitution, covering the costs of the emergency response her false report had triggered. The restitution amount exceeded $50,000, including overtime pay for law enforcement officers, emergency medical services, and the trauma counseling provided to students affected by the lockdown. Additionally, she was banned from all school district property and events, effectively ending her involvement in her son Michael's education and extracurricular activities. Michael, devastated by his mother's actions and their impact on his already damaged academic prospects, chose to live with his grandparents and finish high school in a different district. The civil lawsuit filed by Dawood's host family against Karen was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum that would help cover his college expenses and provide compensation for the emotional distress he had suffered. Karen's homeowner's insurance covered part of the settlement, but the family was forced to sell their house and downsize significantly to meet their financial obligations. Lincoln High School implemented new protocols for emergency reporting, including mandatory training on bias recognition and cultural sensitivity for all staff and volunteers. The chemistry lab where Dawood had worked was renamed the International Student Excellence Laboratory, honoring not just his achievement, but the contributions of all foreign students who chose to study in America. Mrs. Patterson received the State Teacher of the Year award, recognized not only for her excellent instruction, but for her advocacy on behalf of Dawood during his crisis. Her acceptance speech became a viral video about the importance of seeing students as individuals rather than stereotypes, and the responsibility educators have to protect all children under their care. On graduation day, Dawood was chosen as valedictorian, his academic excellence having overcome both the trauma of false accusation and the cultural barriers he faced as an international student. His speech was delivered in both English and Amharic, honoring his heritage while celebrating his American educational experience. "I came to America to learn about chemistry," he told the packed auditorium. "But I learned much more about humanity, both its capacity for prejudice and its potential for justice. The same community that questioned my presence here is now celebrating my achievements, proving that growth and understanding are always possible." His parents had flown in from Ethiopia for the ceremony, seeing their son receive recognition that vindicated their sacrifice and investment in his education. His father, Dr. Tesfaye, was introduced to Professor Johnson, beginning a conversation that would lead to collaborative research projects between their institutions. As Dawit walked across the stage to receive his diploma, the standing ovation lasted for several minutes, a community's attempt to compensate for the injustice he had faced. The volcano project that had nearly destroyed his life was displayed in the school's trophy case, a reminder of how academic curiosity could be misconstrued by prejudice, but ultimately vindicated by truth. The story became a case study in criminal justice courses about the dangers of false reporting and the importance of thorough investigation before acting on accusations. Law enforcement agencies across the state used the incident to train officers on recognizing bias in emergency calls and the need for cultural sensitivity when dealing with international students and immigrants. Karen Whitmore's mugshot became an internet meme, her face associated with the term false accusation Karen in online discussions about racial profiling and community responsibility. Her son Michael, despite the shame of his mother's actions, eventually earned his GED and was accepted to community college, where he worked to rebuild his academic reputation through honest effort rather than his family's connections. 3 years later, Dawit returned to Lincoln High School as a guest speaker, now a sophomore at MIT with research publications in chemistry journals and internships at prestigious laboratories. His volcano project, still displayed in the school, had inspired a new generation of international students to pursue science, despite the challenges they might face. "The eruption you see in this model," he told the assembled students, pointing to his old project, "represents more than just a chemical reaction. It represents the power of knowledge to overcome ignorance, the ability of truth to emerge even under pressure, and the responsibility we all have to base our judgments on evidence rather than assumptions." Mrs. Patterson, now retired, but still volunteering at the school, watched with tears in her eyes as her former student inspired others with his story of resilience and forgiveness. The chemistry lab had become a symbol of the school's commitment to diversity and academic excellence, with Dawit's photograph prominently displayed among other distinguished alumni. The Ethiopian Students Association, founded in response to Dawit's experience, had grown to include students from across Africa and the Middle East, creating a support network that helped international students navigate both academic challenges and cultural barriers. Their annual science fair had become a celebrated community event, showcasing the contributions of immigrant and exchange students to American education. As Dawit concluded his presentation and prepared to return to his laboratory research at MIT, he reflected on how a moment of prejudice had ultimately strengthened his resolve and deepened his appreciation for the power of education to transform both individuals and communities. The false accusation that nearly destroyed his dreams had instead become the foundation for advocacy that would protect future students from similar injustices. The volcano still sits in Lincoln High School's trophy case, its perfect eruption sequence a testament to scientific precision and teenage determination. Visitors often ask about the story behind the project, and tour guides tell them about the young man who turned a moment of crisis into a lifetime of achievement, proving that truth and perseverance can overcome even the most destructive lies. Karen Whitmore completed her sentence and moved to another state, her name forever associated with the harm that can be caused by false accusations and racial prejudice. Her actions had cost her family their home, their social standing, and their peace of mind, while teaching an entire community about the importance of confronting bias before it destroys innocent lives. The legacy of that terrifying night continues to shape Lincoln High School's culture, reminding everyone who walks its halls that education is a privilege that comes with the responsibility to see beyond differences and celebrate the pursuit of knowledge in all its forms. Dowit's story became more than just a cautionary tale about false accusations. It became an inspiration about the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of truth.